Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it is time for another one of my awesome, stupendous, edge-of-your-seat top 10 lists. Now, the last top 10 list that I did was the top 10 licensed properties that should be made into good board games. Clumsiest title for a top 10 list ever. However, I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope that if I turned you on to some very cool property, you know, anime, video game, TV show, movie, whatever it was, if I at least turned you on to one of those, something that's near and dear to my heart, mission accomplished. I hope you had a good time watching it. If you haven't watched it, go and watch that. I don't care which order you watch it in. This one first, that one first, whatever. Anyways, I did mention in that one that was going to lead into my next top 10 list, and here we are. This is my top 10 board games that would be made into cool movies. Now, I specifically wanted to do movies because TV shows, I don't know, that's a little too specific because a lot of games, you know, it's just the nature of the game. If a game takes you 2 hours to play and your story of whatever type of story that you're playing out is finished in just a couple of hours, that would be even harder to translate into a TV show. But I do think that a lot of them could be encapsulated into either a 2-hour movie or a series of movies. And there's definitely some on this list that would be eligible for that. Now, am I saying that this is even remotely possible? Probably not. I think it's more likely that most of the properties on that other top 10 list that I did could be made into board games than any of these being made into movies. But it is possible. There's a couple on here that I could definitely see it happening because they're such a popular game and they're so richly thematic. So you never know. It would be very, very cool to see that happen. I do want to mention before we go any further that I'd kind of had this sort of idea clicking around in my head for a while, but the real impetus for this and what really got me to thinking about it even more was another article that I saw online of a gentleman who had the same idea. And so a lot of my picks are I think we have some crossover on our list, but a lot of my picks are very different. So I'm going to have a little link in the doobly-doo, as PBS Idea Channel likes to say, to that gentleman's list. You should check that out as well to see some more ideas and some unique picks and some more inspiration. And I'd like to know your picks as well. Please comment down below. Tell me what some of your favorite board games that you think are just dying to be made into a movie or TV show or whatever it is. You know, theme is very important to me in board games, and it's tough to see a theme just, you know, stay there on the board and on those cards. You want to see it come to life in some cases. So I think about that all the time with games that I play. And this was a tough list for me. I had to cut a lot of games off this list just because I wanted to limit myself to 10. So there's a rich world of thematic games out there. And here are my top 10 games that should be made into movies. Now, my pick for number 10, a lot of people are probably going to cry foul at it because no one has ever accused this game of being very thematic and of having the it's got sort of a pasted-on theme that doesn't necessarily integrate that well with the mechanics of the game. And it could be any type of theme plastered onto this. In fact, this game was rethemed by the company who produced it into a completely different genre, fantasy instead of science fiction. But this game is all about the theme that the people bring to it and the interactions of those people around the framework of those mechanics. And I do think that that basic framework could do very, very well in the theme as presented. And I'm beating around the bush, but what is the game? The Resistance from Indie Board and Cards. Now, in this game, if you're not familiar with it, it's sort of a party game, and it's all about bluffing and deception. It's a team game. One team is the Resistance, one team are spies who have infiltrated the Resistance, and what the theme is supposed to be is this, like, dystopian future where this evil corporation or this evil government is suppressing the people, and you're the brave members of the Resistance trying to fight back against them, but you've been infiltrated by spies. Everyone gets a loyalty card. No one knows who's on whose team for sure. You have to go through these missions, and if you're the Resistance, try and find out who the spies are and succeed on enough missions before the spies tank enough missions. And the whole game just lends itself this whole air of suspicion and distrust and yelling back and forth, and no one trusts anybody, and there's this constant tension throughout it. You never know what's going to happen. If you're a spy, you're just trying your best to stay hidden and lie as well as you can. And while the theme might not be this strong, it was rethemed from science fiction to Camelot with Resistance Avalon. Nevertheless, I think that if you do take that theme and make it into a bigger production, it could be very, very cool. This wouldn't have to be a science fiction movie with a lot of special effects and explosions. It could be more like Reservoir Dogs, where it's just a very character-driven, very character-centric. It could even be like sort of a 12 Angry Men type thing where these people just get trapped in a room and they have to figure out who the spy is. Also like Reservoir Dogs, where these people are trapped in this location with each other and trying to figure out who's who, and it's just guns constantly pointing at each other. I think it could work really, really well. And if you want to do Resistance Avalon, go ahead. That could work well too. Maybe that'll be the sequel. All the characters go back in time. I don't know. But I think it's a cool idea. I think that it's popular enough that it actually could happen. The Resistance from Indie Board and Cards, my number 10. Privateer Press has a series of games with the moniker of Level 7. They all take place in the same universe, and it's all about how aliens crash landed on Earth. The government took some of them basically hostage and has been using them, including this like evil alien mad scientist, to try and make advanced alien weaponry in like an Area 51 type facility. And in the first game, Level 7 Escape, which I haven't played but I've heard is a terrible game, the humans have been abducted and are being used as scientific experiments by this evil doctor, and you're trying to escape from the facility. And there's another game on the horizon called Level 7 Invasion, where the aliens have basically invaded Earth and they're wiping everyone out. But I am more focused on the middle game that has come out that I think could be made into a fantastic movie that you wouldn't even need the context of the other two games for. And that's Level 7 Omega Protocol. In this game, you play as most of the players in the game play as the cleanup crew who are going down into that Area 51 facility, the Level 7 facility, and trying to wipe out the alien threat and keep it contained and keep it from spilling out onto the Earth. Apparently they failed because of Level 7 Invasion, but nevertheless, there's your sequel. But what this game is very cool because the board game itself is more like a dungeon crawl with a sci-fi theme, which there's not a lot of in that genre of board games. But it's very similar to Aliens in its theme, but in Aliens, it's very hopeless for the heroes because it's a horror movie for the most part. Maybe not the second Aliens as much, the James Cameron one, but it's not about just mowing through aliens and completing a mission. It's just about surviving. But in Level 7 Omega Protocol, you are a highly trained spec ops team, and you're going down into that facility, and you are going to whoop some ass. That is the goal. So I would really like to see that translate to the screen. I would love to see, just these highly trained operatives with all this advanced weaponry just going down there in a tightly knit team and just mowing through these great aliens, fighting all these abominations, these human-alien hybrids. It might be a little cliche at this point, but I think it could be done really, really well. And it would probably be like a Brett Ratner movie, or it wouldn't be it wouldn't necessarily be the smartest movie in the world. There's lots of explosions and alien guts flying around, but it would still be very, very cool. Level 7 Omega Protocol, my pick for the number 9 board game that should be made into a movie. Fantasy Flight Games it specializes not just in thematic games, but also in having some of their games take place in shared universes. You have the Twilight Imperium universe, which bleeds over from the Twilight Imperium main game into the game Rex, which is the retheme of Dune. You have the Cadwallon universe, which goes to City of Thieves and Arcana. And then they also have the Android universe. Now, the most popular implementation of that is Android Netrunner, which actually takes the original Netrunner game from the 90s and re-implements it with the Android theme and universe. It also has Infiltration, also set in the same universe. But the game I want to talk about is just Android, which is the original game in this universe. Now, here's the thing. The Android board game is kind of awful. Gameplay-wise, mechanics-wise, it's a huge steaming mess. There's just so many little bits to keep track of. The game is incredibly long and bloated, and it's like every stereotype of a Fantasy Flight game that is bad about the stereotypes of Fantasy Flight games. But The theme of that game was awesome, and I loved it, and it's why I wanted to give that game a try, and why I may even try it again in the future, because what it is that there's a murder in this sort of dystopian, futuristic, cyberpunk world. There's a murder that you have to get to the bottom of. Each player takes control of a different character who's trying to solve this murder before the others do, and it's just a very diverse cast of characters. One person is like a clone working for a corporation with maybe psychic powers or something. One person is an android. Another is like this former detective turned private detective. One of them is a grizzled ex-war veteran, and she's got all these demons, and every character has all of their personal demons, and you actually try to attack the other players with cards that emphasize those demons and try to trip them up. And it's just such a rich world, and going around the board in your hovercraft and all that. If only the gameplay was better, but I do believe it belongs on this list because it would make an awesome movie. I really believe that. I love character-driven movies, TV shows, books, whatever, and this has awesome characters and a very cool cyberpunk world. I don't think there's enough modern cyberpunk movies, to be honest, that are actually good quality movies. So I doubt this would ever happen. This is definitely one of the ones that would probably never happen because Android itself is such an obscure board game at this point. But I love Android Netrunner, but I don't think that game itself would translate very well into a movie because of all the stuff happening in cyberspace. It would seem kind of cheesy. But the Android board game, which takes place in the real quote-unquote world of that universe, would be very, very cool. So that's my pick for number 8. If Plaid Hat Games were to sum up its mission statement in one word, it would be theme. They have made their entire living and built their company on the prospect of having games with theme and telling a story. And I do believe that their very first hit game, Summoner Wars, despite the fact that it's just a 2-player strategic sort of card-based miniatures game, it tells an awesome story, and I would love to know more about the story. I mean, that's the thing, is that you mostly just get the snippets of the story from the different character backstories that you read, like in the booklets for the characters on the back of the box, and some stuff that you read online. And that universe has been implemented into the world of Dungeon Run, another one of their games as well, but it sort of hints at and sort of teases you with these aspects of a bigger, more grandiose, epic story that I would love to see translated to the big screen, where each player you're in this fantasy world, and in the game, each player is like a summoner with this powerful summoning stone that they use to summon troops in battle against other summoners. But there is this evil tyrant from the Fallen Kingdom who has basically conquered most of the world, and also because of the power of a summoning stone. So I could see in a movie like all of these different factions of like Phoenix Elves and these the Mountain Vargath, like these goat people, and then these human factions all teaming up together, putting aside their differences and uniting all these summoners against this common enemy. And I would love to see the different summoning effects. I think could be very cool. It could deviate into cheesiness if it's not done correctly, but I think that the storytellers of Plaid Hat have done a very good job of setting up that universe, and if they ever did make a movie out of this, I think that they would definitely try to be as involved as possible and therefore make it very, very good. Have all that action, suspense, but also a quirky sense of humor along with it. So Summoner Wars, easily my number 7. Now, at this point, there are more than enough zombie properties out there, whether you're talking about TV shows, books, movies, comic books, and board games. There's tons of zombie stuff, probably too much, but honestly, I don't care. I think there's still room for another awesome, high-octane, fast-paced, just shoot-'em-up zombie movie, and if they're ever going to make another one like that, they would be ridiculously stupid to not use the Zombicide franchise from Cool Mini or not. Zombicide is a very fun, very just total Ameritrashy, luck-driven, cooperative game from Cool Mini or not that is just, it's just the whole game is just watching hordes of zombies come onto the board and then just mowing through them with this really diverse cast of characters, many of whom are sort of caricatures of popular pop culture figures and icons, but some of them are legitimate characters they make for the game itself. And I'm not saying that a movie based on Zombicide would be very smart and very character driven, but it could be, and it could just be very, very fun. Based on the comic book art that they actually use in the game, I would love just seeing an animated version of this. I think that would be super cool. There's just it would definitely be a cheesy movie. It would definitely have the feeling of like a Robert Rodriguez movie, but that's fine. I mean, sometimes you want something dumb and just watching people mow through zombies and just bloody gore and action. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be very fun and it could be done in a smart way. And I think that Zombicide is so popular that, like I said, it's just waiting to be snatched up by a bigger entity and made into another form of media. So Zombicide, my number 6. Just kill zombies. I mean, you can never go wrong with that idea. There are lots of H.P. Lovecraft inspired games of the Cthulhu-verse, the Call of Cthulhu-verse. There's role-playing games, tons of different board games. And while I think that some of them are definitely better than others mechanically, they all have pretty decent themes. But the one that I would most like to see be seen made into a movie is probably my favorite of the different Cthulhu H.P. Lovecraft games, and that's Eldritch Horror. And the reason for that is because Eldritch Horror is much more centered on telling a story and having all of these different encounters and story elements happen to you, and not so much on the different bookkeeping. And those elements that make it into a great board game, I think, would definitely lend itself to making it into a fantastic movie. The game is all about globetrotting. I mean, you're going to these different areas and parts of the world, which would definitely lend this to being a series of movies as well. It has an Indiana Jones type theme sort of mixed with the Cthulhu verse. And while some people don't like that, some people prefer that any game with the H.P. Lovecraft name involved be more of a character-driven, claustrophobic horror hopelessness setting. I like the idea of people going up against insurmountable, impossible odds and still trying to win and come out on top. And I think that's the feeling the board game gives me, and I would love to see a movie where the heroes are just, you know, completely besieged by these nefarious evil monsters, and you're trying to keep the great old one asleep. I mean, which in a movie I assume they would just go ahead and use Cthulhu aside from the other great old ones, but man, I just think it would be cool. I don't think there have definitely been a lot of H.P. Lovecraft inspired movies, and a few probably bad ones inspired directly from his books, but there hasn't been any that have had the feeling of some of the most recent board games, and I think it's long overdue. Eldritch Horror, my number 5. Now, my number 4 is a game that I've only briefly dabbled in, and I've never actually played an entire game of because it is very daunting. It is very hard to get people to want to play it because the length of the game is just so overwhelming, and this game is notorious for it, in fact. But I still am in love with the universe of this game, and that's why I want to play it so badly. And it's from Fantasy Flight Games, and it is Twilight Imperium. This is an epic galactic civilization game where you're building your empire from a very diverse set of different alien races, including possibly the humans. I think they call them Terrans. And trying to spread out and through various different means, either through diplomacy, through war, through trade, build your empire, build it out, and try to take control of like the head throne of the empire, which was recently vacated by this ancient race. And the cast of aliens is just so diverse and cool, and there's all these backstories to them, and I just feel like you could do something with this game, with the property, with the theme, make it into either an epic space opera type thing, make it into a more character-driven story, just focus on one aspect of the universe, you know, set in that backdrop. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love Mass Effect is because you have this whole universe of different creatures, and I think that this game definitely delivers that feeling as well, even if I've never played through an entire game, but I want to. And I just think that it's overdue. I love the Twilight Imperium universe. I could just sit there and read all the lore about the different aliens. And it's, you know, the game's been out for a long time, so who knows, maybe they're never going to do anything with that property other than what they already have, but I think they definitely should. Twilight Imperium, my number 4 board game that should be made into a movie. Okay, I'm going to cheat slightly on my number 3, because while there has been a board game based on this universe, actually it's a deck building game, most of what's in this universe is from a miniatures tabletop game similar to Warhammer, but this one I think is far superior and has a much, much better, cooler universe, and that is Warmachine or Hordes, or most people just say Warmahordes, which are both take place in the same universe, and they can be mixed together and played with each other. But that universe from Privateer Press I just love, because it has a lot of the different fantasy tropes that you expect from other types of fantasy genres. You have elves, humans, you've got magical creatures in the forest, and all these like troll-blooded creatures, and all of that kind of stuff, but it adds this really cool element of these warjacks, which the human races and the elves fight against each other in these like giant steampunk mecha run by magic that these warcasters control. But then you also, in the Horde section of it, you have like these, they call them warlocks, I believe, who control these giant magical beasts. And man, that is just a movie begging to be made. I mean, come on. I mean, you saw what happened with Pacific Rim. You got the remake of Godzilla coming out. So having these giant mechanical and reptilian or whatever magical beast monsters fighting against each other with humans controlling it, so it's still a human-centric story. And there's all these different factions warring against each other, very diverse. You've got like Menoth, which is like a religious fanatic faction. You've got House Signar, who are like the good guys, but they have their own problems as well. Kador, who are like the Russians, I guess, is what they're supposed to be. And then they've got like the elves. I mean, oh man, this could just be a whole series of movies, and each one cooler than the next, introducing more and more stuff in different factions. I just think it's super duper cool, and I think that it should be made into either movies, cartoons, anime, whatever. There's just so much world to work with there, and I think it's far superior than the grim and dreary Warhammer and Warhammer 40k universes. I think it's just better in every way. So Warmachine or Hordes or Warmahordes, whatever you want to call it, that's my number 3. Alright, so funny thing, my last entry was Warmachine or Hordes, and I used that opportunity to sort of bag on the Warhammer universe a bit. But here's the thing. My number 2 game, actually, that should be made into a movie, actually takes place in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. But to me, it is such a self-contained story, so much separate than the traditional miniatures game of the Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40k universes, that even though it does have that sort of grim dourness to it, it is such a cool story that it should definitely. I mean, I read the story in the instruction booklet for the game, and it just leapt off the page. It is Dreadfleet. Now, Dreadfleet, like I said, takes place in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, but it is all about, there's this evil, like, vampire captain who, I think his name is Count Noctilus, who has, like, this fleet called the Dreadfleet that comes out of the... They're often, like, this ship graveyard is where they live, but they come out of the fog, and they just besiege these... different trading lanes, and they destroy seaside cities. And one of the other ships in the fleet is like this evil kraken that this evil chaos dwarf manages, and like this evil like steampunk kraken ship. And there's another one that's like by this like Egyptian cursed pharaoh god, and there's an undead ship. I mean, it's just like these, and these are all, by the way, in the game depicted by these awesome, like really intricate miniatures. But the story of the game is that there's this infamous pirate captain, like human pirate captain, who has his own fleet or his own ship, and it was besieged by the vampire. He ran afoul of it, and I believe like his family was killed or something, or people very close to him were killed, and now he is sworn revenge. So he assembles his own fleet of ships of people who, either by being paid or because they also have a vendetta against the Count and his Dreadfleet as well, they assemble together and just go headlong to the darkness to try and destroy Count Noctilus once and for all. So it's a two-player game, so one player takes control of the Dreadfleet, one player are the good guys, the good fleet, and you're trying to go through these different chapters, these scenarios, almost like you're playing through a story as the good guys fleet tries to go further and further into the darkness to find the base of the Count and try to destroy him once and for all. And man, it's maybe just because it's so well written in the book or because everything is so beautiful as far as the miniatures and the artwork and all of that stuff, but I was reading the whole time thinking, God, this would be such a good movie. I don't even like the Warhammer universe, but it's just so cool. I mean, just left off the page. I think that this would be the perfect cure-all for those awful Pirates of the Caribbean movies because I don't like pirates. That's the other thing, too. I don't even like pirates. I would be there midnight showing of this movie if it ever came out. Never going to happen, but I wish that it would because it's just so cool. I love the storyline. I would love to see the CGI ships for this movie. Anyways, I've gone on long enough. That is Dreadfleet. My number 2 could have been my number 1, but you'll see why it wasn't in a moment. Well, this isn't the first Plaid Hat Games game on this list, but it is the last because it's also my number 1. And this was just an easy choice for me. You know, when I was still concocting this list, I knew it would be on there. I didn't know how high it would be. I knew it would probably be in the top 5, but when I really sat down and think about it, this is the game that most deserves to be made into a movie because I think it could be the most accessible to get people of all ages and all different, you know, likes and dislikes of movies. Everyone will come together to at least give this movie a shot, and that is Mice and Mystics. This is a fantastic board game, soon to be a series of board games. They've already had an expansion. They have a new one coming out soon called Downward Tales. They're all awesome. I've played them all, and it's the story of it's a fantasy story where these people, their kingdom has been taken over by this evil sorceress, and this group of, you know, young knights and wizards and sorcerer and a healer and a rogue, they all get turned into mice to try and escape the sorceress and have to fight against her evil minions while still in the form of mice. It's very similar to an RPG called Mouse Guard, and I've never read it, but there was a series of books. Oh, the name of it is escaping me now, but maybe I'll flash it down here when I remember the name of it, but it reminds me also of Secret of Nim, that old really dark movie, I think from Don Bluth, but it's just so cool. It's so thematic. The game is a story. I mean, you play through the chapters of a storybook, and you're cooperating together, and it's perfect for families, it's perfect for kids, it's perfect for experienced gamers because there's enough meat there, and it's just so thematic and so cool, and the characters come to life so much that how could it not be a movie one day? And it is so popular that I imagine that one day it will be a movie, and it should be. I don't know if it will be live action. It would definitely be CGI to some degree. But there are like some humans walking around as well, so it's either going to be all CGI, maybe it'll be traditional animation, which I think would be awesome. It could look really, really beautiful, but even the artwork in the game is just so gorgeous that it just really just leaps off the page, lends itself to being any kind of media, really. And you should definitely give the game a try, and you should definitely, if anyone who has any kind of influence is watching this, definitely try to get this made into a movie because it's just cool and it would be fantastic. It would be a blockbuster hit, I know it. So that's my number 1, Mice and Mystics from Plaid Hat Games. Well, that's my top 10 list of board games that should be made into movies. I think that we're in a fantastic time now for board games in general, but especially for people who love thematic board games, this is a wonderful time. In fact, as I was, going through filming the different parts of this list, I realized that there were a few different games from Fantasy Flight Games. There was like 2 games from Privateer Press. There was 2 games from Plaid Hat Games, and I realized that some game companies really their whole model is based off of theme and telling a story, and that's a very, very wonderful thing. I'm not going to get into a whole debate about theme and mechanics. Like I said, the game Android from Fantasy Flight, it's a terrible game. But the universe is so cool and the theme is so fun. So you need both. In my opinion, you need a good theme and solid mechanics. And I hope that this is a trend that continues, because most of the games on this list did manage to find the perfect harmony between those two aspects of a board game. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as we go. I hope more and more companies put a greater emphasis on theme. And it's like I said, it's very unlikely that most of these will ever be made into either a movie or a TV show or whatever. But I think it's a lot of fun to think about. So my name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.